Welcome everyone to this quad education webinar on the top college application mistakes, avoiding common pitfalls. We have a couple of our admissions consultants here with us today who are going to walk us through some of the top mistakes that they see, some tips to avoid those, and then we'll answer your questions at the end. Quad Education is an admissions consulting company with a focus on college admission. So we help students and families through the entire admissions process, from just beginning to think about building your college profile all the way through actually applying to college, interviewing, and then choosing which school you would ultimately like to attend. So I want to thank you all for being here with us today. So we'll introduce our consultants in just a minute. We'll talk about why the significance of college applications. We'll talk about the top mistakes that we see, how to avoid those mistakes, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have questions throughout this, pop those in the chat Q&A box, and we will definitely get to those at the end. And then we're also recording this webinar, so you will get an email with it in the next couple days. You can refer back to it as needed as well. We have Arianna and Fedjounie here with us today. They are two of our fantastic consultants that work with students and families just like you throughout the whole admissions process. Arianna, can I have you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi all, I'm Arianna Lee, and I'm an admissions counselor here at Quad, and I graduated from Dartmouth College with a bachelor's in neuroscience. And I've been helping many students like yourselves and demystify the college application process and really get down to the root of how to avoid these common pitfalls of college applications. Love to dive into this topic.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, Arianna and Haley. My name is Fedjounie Philippe, and I am a graduate of Princeton University, currently attending Columbia University. And just like Arianna, I'm very eager to support students through this process. I've been doing it almost 10 years now, and it is always interesting, some of the misconceptions that we have about applications from students, families, young and old. So I'm really excited to talk with you all about this.
Great. Well, thank you both for being here. It's always great to have you both. I feel like I learn so much every time that we all do one of these together. All right, so let's dive into the significance of college applications.
Absolutely. So as you all know, applications are the basis of when it comes across the admissions reader's desk. They want to know as much about you as possible. So it's a crucial tool for colleges to help evaluate their candidates, allowing them to assess, hey, what are your academic achievements? What are your personal qualities? How's your personality shining through maybe in that personal essay, your extracurricular involvement, and if you are ultimately a fit for their institution. So how can your application present all of this to them? So make sure, remember, a strong application positively impacts your chances in admissions for that particular institution.
Mm-hmm. Yes, really great points, Arianna. I also like to emphasize for students and families that a strong application has that cohesion throughout every single piece of the application, but not every piece will look the exact same. You want to take advantage of all of those different letters of recommendation, writing things to showcase a different aspect of yourself as a student, right? To present that holistic picture.
So true.
So I think that's something that's definitely not talked about enough, and we definitely try to push as much as possible. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that further as we go through this. All right, so why we're all here is to really talk about the mistakes that we see and how to avoid those. So let's talk about some of those mistakes.
So one key mistake that we see is that students don't have a lot of time, or they just aren't aware of the opportunities that they have for really understanding a school through research and planning. So without this thorough research, students can look very important. You can overlook very important information about the college's offerings, classrooms, right? Like financial aid even, or The school year calendar structure. There are so many different aspects of that will help you personally choose your school, but also help you not fall behind on admissions requirements like financial aid applications if the school has a specific one, and other aspects like that. Um, but yeah, we're just going to research, plan, really look thoroughly through these school websites in preparation for a successful application period.
Absolutely. And that's an awesome point too with the financial aid deadlines. A lot of people, they miss it and they wait till the regular decision applications, and they're like, oh wait, what about financial aid, or what about these scholarships? You missed it. Had you known about it, or you'd have been able to catch that. And a lot of students ask, what is the appropriate amount of research? There is no right answer to how much research you should be doing, but you should at least know the basics. When are deadlines due? What are the admission requirements? What courses are required? What is it, a personal essay that's required? Is it supplemental essays? At least know the basic information for the schools that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Or even like how many recommenders a school requires. Some will ask for 3, some will ask no more than 2. So like those specifics, you have to get into those little details.
Very true.
So I'm hearing you say that the night before the application is due is not the time for me to be looking up those things.
No, definitely not.
Hopefully, if everyone who is attending, you are here, in July. Admissions deadlines aren't for quite a few months, so it seems like hopefully you're a little bit ahead of the game already, and this will help you be even further ahead of the game. With research, one question that we do get quite often is, when should you just start researching colleges as a whole? Should that be in your junior year, if we have some sophomores, rising juniors here with us, or should it be earlier than that? When is the right time to start just thinking about college?
Well, the truth is that there are over 5,000 colleges in the United States. And you would never have enough time, even if you started when you were 5 years old, like getting to all of these colleges. But I do recommend for my students to start for like families as early as like sophomore year, right? Not really being as rigorous. This could be just if you take a family trip to Boston, you visit some of the 3 or 4 schools that are right central in that area, right? And make it something that is more so you're going on a walking tour, and then changing the rigor or the ways that you try to like interact with the schools that you're interested in as you're going into 11th and your application year in your 12th grade year. But having both the student and the parent accessing early exposure to these institutions helps you both build a relationship that demonstrates interest, but also provide kind of a structure for how you're looking at other schools too. So that early visit your sophomore year will help you ask in your junior or senior year what schools really have to offer for you, considering these are the standards you have already set.
Love that, standards you've already set. That's nice. Yeah, and I would say you're starting to develop those questions too. Like, okay, what majors are you starting to get interested in? Does the school offer it? How far is this school away from where I'm living at? Or how much is you can start working with financial aid if that's a factor for you, or you can start looking at different things that, like she said, what are the list of what I love and what don't I love? And how does the school compare? Am I the right fit for the school, or is the school the right fit for me? Start figuring those out.
Oh, and another point for parents or students looking for access programs, a lot of universities offer things for students who are in their freshman, their junior, their senior year, their sophomore year, well, more so freshman to junior, to really gain exposure, do like a summer research kind of thing. So early visits lets you plan for that as well.
I also want to add, like, if you're a sophomore looking at schools, pay attention to what the grade point averages, the average GPAs that are accepted there, where do you stack up? Earlier you are in high school, the more time you have to course correct if you need to get your GPAs up to attend, to, you know, be competitive for a school that you might really like and give yourself a good shot. All right, so we did just talk about this a little bit, but we can dive in a little bit more about how to avoid making the mistake of not researching early enough.
Absolutely. Yes. So like we were saying, it is very important to start early. If the earlier you start, you can course correct. You can figure out, hey, is this the right school for me? You can dedicate that time towards your college of interest if you already have one, or maybe figure out your top schools, explore their websites, go to virtual information sessions. Like Fedjounie said, do they have access programs that I can get a head start in, do the summer enrichment and figure out, do I like this environment? Talk to admissions representatives, talk to students that are currently there, or even up past alumni or recently graduated alumni that can give you some insights and pointers as far as even getting into the school if that's a top school of choice for you. Take note of admission requirements, prerequisites, and any supplemental material needed. So that means letters of recommendation, like we already said from slide one. Make sure you look and see what is needed. Recommenders. Do I have the number of recommenders needed? And if you are a rising senior, you should ask and reach out to your potential letters, your recommenders, and start getting that in order. Start having your checklist ready. Pretty much anything you can do to avoid waiting to the last minute and before hitting submit, you should do so.
Yes. I definitely agree on that. All of the points, honestly. Arianna, thank you. And also just want to flag for students as well, just thinking about how your school runs, right? Like some of the factors that we can't really control that could have a greater impact on us is your relationship with your guidance counselor and the information and speed with which they send some of the documents that are really important to you to get out. Like schools require mid-year reports, and some counselors don't send those when they should, and that can affect the students' outcomes. So building those early relationships, even in your junior year with your counselor, with your teachers, will help with getting those recommendations and pushing your process along a bit faster. Just making sure that you're open, a sponge to all the information, just absorbing it all and taking advantage of organizational skills. Because that's another point. It's one thing to know them, but to keep track of those dates, that's a different beast.
And one more point too. You're right. People are only as serious as you present to them. So make sure you stay on your counselor. You're serious about getting into the schools that you're interested in. Mm-hmm. They are going to see how serious you are. Your recommenders, your teachers. Hey, I'm serious about this.
Right.
Let that energy be there and exhibit that always.
Yes.
You are your best advocate.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we did talk about this very briefly a minute ago, but not completing required courses.
Yes. So this actually loops right back into what Arianna was just talking about in terms of you advocating for yourself and understanding that some programs, specifically STEM programs, they have rigid requirements of their students in terms of having prerequisites for mathematics, for like science, right? Like having calculus or pre-calc, or having a high level of math skills to go into engineering, chemistry, bio programs. So be very specific in looking at those program requirements for not only the school that is admitting you, but the specific department or whatever research focus is driving you to that school, because often they are the same, yes, but the department may have more requirements outlined than the generic for everyone trying to get into the school. And it's also important to recognize that schools also have a language requirement. So as a student, you're expected to fulfill some level of language attainment. Is typically 1 to 2 years, depending on your school system. And if your school doesn't offer that, there are ways to advocate for yourself. And your counselors here at Quad will help you with doing those things if you choose to get our support with that. But understanding that these things can hurt your application if you aren't on top of it. But there are definitely ways to be on top of it, which we'll share as well.
Absolutely. And just when you set language requirement too, if you're an international student, make sure you're being aware of the TOEFL or I forget the other language test, but make sure you're aware of that and starting early. So that way that's not a last minute requirement for you to complete.
Yes.
That's good though. Yeah. So how to avoid it? Like we've been talking about, again, starting early. That's number one. But creating a comprehensive college list, which does include your safeties, your matches, and your reaches. Again, we can work with you on that too, if you choose to. And again, conducting thorough research on each. What are these requirements for if I'm doing a dual degree program, or if I'm looking to do particular specialized performing arts? What are the requirements needed for each major or each specific program that I'm looking to go into? If I'm looking into a film study or a film major, and I needed to have these particular portfolio together, make sure you just have everything outlined. Your organizational skills, as Fedjounie said, will be key. You want to have it, whether it's in a binder, on a to-do list on your iPhone, whatever the case is, make sure you're staying on top of what are the requirements and when are they due, and how soon should I have them prepared for review? Because again, you want to put together your best application. So you want to have it reviewed a few times as well from your recommenders or someone that you're working with closely, a mentor or counselor, to make sure that you are hitting the particular curriculum requirements needed for each school.
Yeah. One trick I like to suggest for my students and families is to create a Google Sheet or an Excel, right? That will act as both your college application list, where you have your schools listed out. You have their ACT, SAT, GPA requirements, right? Location, as well as like some of the factors that stand out to you about that school and things that drive you to it. But you can also add notes about application deadlines and things in that. Make it a comprehensive thing if that works for you as a larger tracker, and then having those smaller to-dos. But thinking about ways that you can strategize to stay on top of this, because it's not expected that you're going to keep 12 to 15 schools and all of their deadlines in your mind, right? Like you need something to help you keep track of this. And that is how people who are successful in this process, that is how they're successful, right?
Absolutely. Or you could just be like me and have a ton of sticky notes. I'm just kidding.
No, that works for some system, right? Like realizing the systems that actively work for you, because there's not a one size fits all. But yes. Okay. Thank you. I think Haley's out, but we have control. So the next point is on a resume. So this is a very tricky topic for a lot of people, right? We understand that you guys are really accomplished individuals, right? Some of you are doing amazing things as teenagers. And I'm like, what was I doing, right? When it was my chance to do all the amazing things. But we also recognize that in all of these application materials, you have word limits or page limits. You have specifications or a template that has been created for these types of things, because these schools are receiving thousands of applications most years, and they won't have the chance to go through a 3-page resume for just one student, because then that disadvantages every other student in the process. And typically that will lead admissions counselors to look at your application with a bit less enthusiasm, right? And we want to think about how the person who is receiving our application, in every single aspect, how they would get that as a person, right? How they're receiving it as an admissions committee. So we want to highlight relevant and significant experiences that really speak to who you are or the character that you're building throughout. And typically, right, you don't have the opportunities to submit a full resume. You're sending the Common App activities list, and that is restricted to a word limit, right? So when you think about, I like to have my students think about 2 different resumes. The resume or brag sheet that they're submitting to people who are writing recommendations and things like that. Like, make that long, give them examples, let them know what to write about, because that will help in securing a better letter of recommendation. Even though you can't read it, you know what you have guided them with, and knowing who you are. And then think about how you are going to talk about your achievements in the common application, or in the limited section if you're doing a school specific application, in the limited sections that they give you, because there are word limits. There are going to be word limits. But yeah, just thinking about ways to present something concise that speaks to the experiences that most stand out to you, or really highlight those key aspects of your character that you want to shine.
Absolutely. Yeah, did you ever have an English assignment that was due and it had to be 1,000 words long? So you start adding extra bullet points and make it really long.
Yep.
This, I feel like sometimes we get caught in that habit of when we're doing the resume, like, hey, I want to make it seem like I'm doing just everything. And you are doing everything. You all are very impressive young students that are tackling it all. But like Fedjounie said, you stick to the most important, and sometimes these things can be condensed together. So instead of listing your 13 events that you might have put on for your club, maybe you condense it down and say the hours that you spent organizing it, or what was the turnout, what was the purpose of the events. Maybe look at it from a different perspective, instead of trying to make it really long when you can get across the same message a different way.
Yes. Love that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to avoid this. So I think to really avoid this, it's important to have a structure where you are thinking about how you're going to write your bullet points. So Arianna kind of alluded to this a bit, but typically in the career resume writing coaching sphere, we talk about the STAR method, and that is for more so organizing, right, your achievements and how you present it to the person that you're presenting it to. So thinking about why this is important to you, what you were able to accomplish, the results because of the specific actions that you did, like thinking of structuring a sentence like that, right? Like, this isn't going to be several bullet points, as we were saying earlier, right? You only have but so much space in the applications to list some of the things that you would put in a resume. So making sure that you have like your name, your email, your address, your relevant high school information, your graduation date, as it relates to like your GPA, your class rank, your SAT score. This is all information that you should be putting on the resume that you're sending to people who are writing a recommendation for you, as well as a resume that will help you structure your responses for your Common App submissions or your school-specific submissions. If you have any academic publications, honors, and awards, you definitely want to highlight those, as they will help you distinguish your application. Think about ways that you can also include your completed coursework, right? This could be if you have it that you've listed your high school, you can also put relevant coursework and then list those out rather than giving them a whole section and things like that. Make it a bullet point right under your high school's name. Make sure to list your extracurricular activities, including community service. Some students like to separate this, right? Like they'll have professional work experience, they'll have leadership experience, and then they'll have volunteer experience. And if you have the space in the formatting, the text size to do that, definitely do that. Or you can make 2 separate categories, professional and then leadership, and add your community service there, and just note that it's a volunteer experience opportunity. And of course, your professional or like your work experience. And don't feel that just because you are not working as an intern, like you work at Jamba Juice or you're working at Subway, like all the things that you do matter. So listing those hours that you are working at Subway and the skills that you're learning, right? Like, don't think of your skills as related to just that job. Think of it as transferable. What are the things that you're learning how to do better as the person you are, and how can you put that into your bio degree or into your acting major, right? Like, think about how that will translate to the person reading your application and the recommender writing your recommendation letters. Oh, did you have a point? I'm sorry, Arianna, did you have a point?
No, I was gonna say awesome. No, yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. So writing impersonal admissions essays, and I'm sure you all have heard this a lot if you've ever watched any of our webinars, but make sure that your personality is coming through. So colleges rely on essays to gain as deep of an insight into who you are outside of your academic persona that you put forth already in your application. The admissions essay, the personal essay, is giving another section, another layer of who you are. So admissions officers, again, they're reading numerous essays. We talked about all the applicants that they're getting and how much time that they have. So it's really crucial to be as distinctive as you can. And how distinctive can you be? It is to be as you can be. So make sure your personality is coming through. Make sure, try to not sound like what you think that they want to hear. Avoid vague language. Try to be descriptive. Try to key into the 5 senses. How is your essay going to really stick out to the admissions officers where they're going to remember once they put it down? Mm-hmm. And that is by hitting either nostalgic points or points of sensation. So really think deep and have colorful language, not colorful bad, colorful descriptive. Mm-hmm. So that is the best way to really have your essay stick out from the crowd. Mm-hmm. And again, start early.
Yes.
Try and brainstorm and get your ideas out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I definitely agree. I think one common misconception for like my students and families is that this is an essay that wants you to respond to the question and respond to the question only. And I think that's something that's not really publicized outside of our specific circle, but knowing that this is for you to tell your story, right? Like if we wanted to read like a narrative, not I am responding to this specific question because this is what you've asked of me, Princeton, right? Like you want Princeton to be invested in you as a person, and that is where they get some of that motivation, as Arianna was saying, like how can you appeal to the senses of the reader, right? Thinking about your dialogue, description, just the moments that you are pointing out, being strategic about what you're highlighting from your own experiences to push forward whatever you're sharing with these committees in terms of like who you are, what you're highlighting as part of your character. But yes.
Note there also is, I think one of the prompts generally is always write about whatever you want, right?
Right.
So you can use that as well. You can use the others as food for thought, inspiration, but you can also deviate from those as well.
It's the vehicle, that it's the theme. You are still having to tell your story. The question is just merely the vehicle of how you get there. Right. So how are you going to bring your story to life?
Yep. And the thing is, like, you can do that however you want. I've seen students respond to a question and they haven't responded to the question at all. But if the theme fits the question and it's just like, okay, you've done the task, but you didn't necessarily have to even respond to the question. So I know it sounds like philosophical. We're talking in all of these parallels, but when you start doing the work, you'll understand it a bit. It's more doing. It's doing and redoing, and I think that's something we want to highlight too. Like, you're gonna do this a couple of times, do a couple of drafts. This isn't a one and go thing. But it's very important to think about how to bring that authentic self in this process. And that's how you'll avoid kind of an impersonal essay. So thinking about those unique personality points, right? Going into your own thoughts, your feelings, your actions and reflections, but also conferring with your family, right? Like asking them some of the questions, right? Making sure you respond to them first, because sometimes we get colored by the way that people see us. But also going back to your mom, like, hey, what do you think I'm interested in academically? Like, if someone were to ask you that, what would you respond, right? Because sometimes we don't see what the people around us are seeing. And they may see a brilliant light where we're seeing the lights shut off, right? So thinking back on your own experiences and looking and leaning upon the people who know you best to also will help you kind of avoid the nondescript personal statement issue.
Absolutely. And sometimes, especially family, they will have memories of you that you have completely either blocked out because you wanted to, or two, because you just simply, it just wasn't significant in your mind, or you feel like others, admissions officer wouldn't want to or wouldn't care about this. But in fact, that's exactly what they care about, are those unique, moments that you feel like are not meant or not important to be shared. Those sometimes are one of the most, or some of the greatest moments to share. So don't overlook certain things. Make sure you confer with family.
I think that brings up a great point, Arianna. I know a question that we do get a lot, especially when we're talking about essays, is students feel like they don't have anything unique or special to write about, or sad enough, or tragic enough to write about in their essays. But I think you brought up something fantastic, that it can be small, simple things that you're writing about that make you unique. You don't have to, you don't have to make someone cry. You don't have to have an experience that no one else in the history of the world has ever had to write a good essay and be accepted. Absolutely. I don't know if either of you wants to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of times you're exactly right. For a while, I don't know whether it was a trend or the thinking that sometimes that we have to pull out the saddest moment or the most transformative moment, we automatically think is the saddest moment of our lives. And I don't know why that is. Some of our most transformative moments are happy moments, or moments with loved ones, or moments that you realize that you have a talent that you didn't know about, or another passion. Everything does not have to be one way. And again, if you're going to Google accepted essays, their story is not your story. So when you're looking and trying to replicate or duplicate someone else's words, because sometimes that happens, a lot of students, they get anxious and they want to look up every accepted essay, Harvard accepted essay, Princeton accepted essay, and they lose themselves in someone else's words. You don't have to have a sad story. You just have to be as unique as you can be. Get your personality across. If your story is sad, or I don't want to say that. If you've had moments that were sad and you want to express them, that is your right to do so. But it doesn't have to be that way in order for you to be accepted into the institution.
Yeah. And I think there are questions that are, some of the prompts on the Common App actually asks for that not to be the thing, right? Tell us about an academic thing that intrigues you, something that's you met there are questions that aren't even specific about experience per se, but more so how your mind works. So you could take advantage of those questions if you feel like there isn't one pivotal moment that changed your whole life. Because some of us, we have a collection of little moments that build upon each other. And then we're like, oh, okay, I guess that was important, right? But also being open to that, right? I guess that was important, right? Like some of the things that we feel are so small, when we put them together, they show like a larger trend. And that is another way to also think about approaching that I don't have a story misconception as well.
We do have quite a few webinars on writing personal statements, brainstorming, putting them together. So, and those are all on our website. If you go to our webinars page, you can find those if you scroll down and watch those for free. And those are, each webinar dives into that specifically and more than we can do so in just a couple of slides here.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So another crucial mistake that you can make as an applicant is not joining any extracurricular activities. As we've been sharing throughout, right? Colleges really want to know who you are and how you navigate your own community, because ultimately you're going to join their community, right? Like they want to know that you're going to be a member in whatever way that is. This doesn't mean that you have to do every single club or activity, fair or summer program, but that you should try to vigorously pursue your interests, because that is what most stands out, right? It's not the program you do, it's not this and that, it's how you go after what you want and how you show other people that you want to develop your skill. It's all about showing that growth, because ultimately you're applying to, tell them like, oh, these are my interests, these are my talents, this is my leadership ability. But as we know, actions speak louder than words, right? Like having those experiences on your resume, it boosts what you're saying and it adds more credibility to it. So thinking about ways that you can just better yourself as a student and as an individual outside the classroom, and pairing that with the work that you're doing inside the classroom will help you create a more rounded application.
Absolutely. And also, one thing to remember too, you don't necessarily have to be president of the club of interest that you're in, but what else have you done, or how dedicated are you to this particular interest? Right. If you love to crochet and this is just one of this is your passion, that is perfectly fine. How are you going to legitimize this to admissions officers? Or what ways are you making impact with your crochet? Are you donating it? Are you teaching kids on the weekends how to crochet? You can make anything that you are passionate about something.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. Yes, Arianna, on all the points. I had a student who was really worried because a lot of the clubs that she was in, she wasn't able to have leadership roles in because they were popularity positions or something like that she shared. And I asked her, well, like, what are you doing outside of that? How are you engaging with your advisor? Like, have you asked for special projects, right? Like there are even things inside a club that you could do, or ways that you can take your own initiative, as Arianna is saying, right? Like to create something from what you're doing, right? Spread it around in your community, help other people understand it better. And that also shows your commitment to developing your interests. Yeah, really great points.
I know we're about to talk about how to avoid this, but one thing I do want to bring up and have maybe one or both of you answer is, what if I have to work through high school and don't have time to join extracurriculars or like the money to, or I need to be at home taking care of a sick relative or sibling? Will I get dinged for that? How do I still engage in extracurricular activities in ways that colleges want?
I think that is a really tough question. And it's the reality for a lot of students. Like, I want whoever is asking this question or whoever is facing this to understand that you're not alone And some students, they don't have the freedom to work extracurricular activities just because they may have to take care of their siblings, or other factors that come into play. But those are all relevant things to highlight too. So working, taking care of your siblings, those are like family responsibilities. On the Common App, there is a place for you to put that even on your application extracurricular list. So thinking about making meaning in those obligations as well, because that comes across and explains who you are, the responsibilities that you value as well. And also taking advantage of summer opportunities. I talked about it a little, but if it's something that you can't really do throughout the school year, it could be something that you do over the summer, and there's an option to choose that. Yeah, there are some ways to work around it. Your specific consultant through Quad would be able to help you craft the best profile to really highlight some of those things if that is your experience. But definitely don't discount not being able to do in school or out of school extracurriculars and working or taking care of family or doing things that just aren't available to you, because some kids, they don't have those opportunities as well, like their school doesn't offer that. So sharing that, highlighting that is also good.
Absolutely. And remember, the application is where that is your story. So you are telling your story. If you have to work those extra hours at your job, how are you doing in said job? What are you doing in said job? Are you maybe connect with your manager, maybe look at other ways that you can make impact there. And like Fedjounie said, summer programs, if that's available. I know cities and there are programs available for free summer programs, if that is a concern. There's virtual programs. There's things that you can do as well that exist outside of that scope. And also you're showing the university that you're applying to that you can maintain a job. Maybe you also are maintaining extracurriculars, you're maintaining family responsibilities, and you're maintaining your GPA. This is awesome to show. So don't think of it as a disadvantage. How can you help shine that light on it to show, hey, I'm just as committed as everyone else?
Yep. And more recently, just one note before we move on, I'm thinking because of COVID, there are remote opportunities too. So if you're thinking, oh, I can't leave my house, or I have to, like, you could take advantage of a remote program. I know like Girls Who Code offers some remote summer programs or things like that, that you could do programs throughout the year too.
Awesome. And how do we avoid it? So again, joining your clubs, your sports teams, community service, even if none of those things that are currently available at your school are of interest to you at all, because I've heard that before, you can always create your own club or organization, or you can also do your own community service initiative. It doesn't have to be limited to what's currently available. However, if you are going to start your own club or organization, make sure you have a mentor, a teacher, or someone who can co-sign and also be there to write and see how dedicated you are to the initiative that you started. And these activities, they help demonstrate and show, again, that commitment, that level of dedication to admissions officers, that you are taking a serious approach to your school, your community, and you're willing to make an impact. You're contributing to your personal growth as well as the growth of others around you. And that's what they want on their campus. You are the next generation. So they want as many great, talented, brilliant minds as they can in their next class. So you're helping show that. And again, it's showing well-roundedness, which is what we want.
Another key mistake that we see sometimes is students not taking the opportunity to write optional essays. And this kind of just goes back to a point that I was sharing earlier about using every piece of your application strategically and realizing that it's an opportunity to showcase a different part of yourself that isn't necessarily going to be in your GPA or your SAT or ACT scores, right? Sometimes they are not mandatory depending on your school. Some schools will make them absolutely mandatory. There's some schools who have optional or supplemental essays, like 7 or 8 things, right? Like 7 or 8 questions. So some of those essays are absolutely mandatory, but there are some that are not. And often students will skip over them because it's like, I've already written 10 or 18 optional essays for just 2 different schools. So why do I have to do these other ones that, are actually truly optional? But it shows schools, typically it's a question about like an offering that they have, or it's an optional essay that you could do to get more funding, right? Sometimes it's for like a merit scholarship or something like that. So thinking about ways that you can position yourself as an applicant that is a bit more serious, right? Like, and willing to do the extra legwork to show your interest to the schools, and taking advantage of a chance to kind of like make your application stand out a bit more, and add more of those layers, right? That depth to who you are as a person, those different facets, and giving your unique quality or perspective. Because often there'll be questions about, again, what intellectually intrigues you, or some experience that you've had in the past or something like that, where you can play with it and add more information.
Oh, Arianna, I think you are on mute. I don't know if you.
Nice. No, I was going to say, yes, any opportunity to set yourself apart from the competition. So I don't mean to sound so crass, but yes, there's any way to set yourself apart from your competition, do so. Why not? Do all the optional essays, even if it's 50. Yes, writing the optional essays, everything that she's already said, you are showcasing again that you are committed. You are taking that extra step. You're doing the extra legwork to set yourself apart, and it shows well to admissions committee, or at least it shows better than what it would have had you not done it, by taking that extra step.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to go through this next section and then leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So I know we talked a lot about ways to avoid these, so we won't go too in depth here to leave room for questions. So if you have any, pop those in the Q&A box and we'll get to those in just a minute or two.
Okay, so our first 2 strategies to avoid application mistakes. Start the application process early and choose your recommenders wisely. As we said, the process actually starts with research and planning. So starting that as soon as possible, and making sure that you're providing yourself with valuable opportunities to not only build your list, research college, understand their deadlines and requirements, but to also prepare yourself even as a competitive candidate, right? To understand what the schools want and need from you. When you will apply, and thinking about choosing your recommenders and how they can speak to who you are and your strengths as a person, and taking advantage of that early planning to build those good relations so that it can be a bit easier for them to write as a recommender, but also preparing your materials so that they have something to write about.
Awesome. Yes, highlight meaningful extracurricular activities, proofread and review. I think we didn't say that one, and meet deadlines. So highlighting meaningful extracurricular activities, make sure that, again, you're not just rifling off a long list of everything that you've done, but that you are choosing and highlighting the ones that were most significant, most impactful, and help develop maybe you, or you've developed your leadership and personal skills through said activities. Proofread and review. Again, the earlier you start, the easier this is, but have you read it, have your mentors, your counselors, your teachers proofread and review your essays if at all possible. That way you're missing grammatical errors, any mistakes, any unclear sentences. It shows to the admissions officer that if you're not serious and couldn't proofread your essay, how else are you not going to be serious? So make sure that you take the time to do that. It does show to admissions officers whether you're serious or not through those small things. Meet deadlines. Again, if you've already set forth that list that we talked about earlier, you can have that organization that we talked about, not the sticky notes everywhere like me, but you have your application deadlines and what things are needed, whether those are extra courses that you still have yet to take or anything else like recommendations that are needed before deadlines are due.
All right, so the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, pop those in the chat. One question we do have is someone goes to a high school but is part of an independent study program. Would it be okay if their recommenders are from other institutions?
Yeah. I would say yes. Typically, though, it depends on what that recommender is supporting you with. If they are in an independent program in the arts, it may not be valuable because most recommendations are required from a core subject teacher for college applications. So if you had someone from an independent study program that would act as a third recommender on top of that core subject, or you're working with them in a core subject that demonstrates your abilities and they can speak to who you are as a learner, then definitely substitute those if you haven't been able to build relations with someone in a typical high school situation. What are your thoughts, Arianna?
No, I would agree. And also, if the recommender, do they know you from ninth grade prior, or is this a recommender that has known you and known your level of study and dedication 10th grade on? I would say, what grade year were they serving with you, or were you aware of?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a good time to highlight, make sure you look at the requirements. Some schools want guidance counselor and 2 academic teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you are following that.
Yes, and I don't know that I was clear with core subject. That's typically like reading, language, arts, math, science. Those are considered the typical core subjects.
All right. So another question we have is UCAG course, is fulfillment a must? For example, virtual and performing arts. And I think this is specific to University of California's system.
Oh.
And I think you'll probably want to ask a counselor more specifically about that. I don't know if Fedjounie or Arianna, you have a specific experience with this, but from the little bit that I know about this, if it's a requirement, it's definitely a requirement. I think there's a certain number of courses you need to take within that.
Could they clarify the question? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the beginning of it. UCA is
A through G course, is fulfillment a must? See.
Like it's taking a art course a requirement?
Yeah. No, it's like the UC system, they have like a subject requirement A through G, and students are typically required to complete like 15-year-long like high school courses with a letter grade of C or better. So I think that is a specific requirement for University of California. And they outline specifically like what they would like on their website. So I would recommend speaking to a counselor and also looking at their website to kind of strategize if you haven't been able to take a certain mathematics or science or language or visual and performing arts course, then you would want to check in about that.
This might be a great time to talk to an admissions counselor at the university who deals with this day in, day out.
Mm-hmm.
Another question, how many AP courses are required for top level colleges?
That's a good question. It's not a real, required, preferred. Well, when you're talking about top level colleges and you are applying against other students who have taken either dual enrollment courses, IB courses, AP courses to stay competitive, it is ideal to take as many difficult courses as your school allows. Not every school has AP, not every school has IB, and so on. So taking the courses that are most difficult without jeopardizing your GPA, of course, would be most preferred if you are planning to be admitted into those top level colleges.
Mm-hmm. And at most of these schools, you can have those courses on your transcript, but you don't necessarily have to have the scores. You don't have to submit your test scores to them. So if you were to take an AP course and you get a 2 on the exam, you don't necessarily have to report that because they primarily use your AP test scores for placement at those more prestigious schools. Like they help you go up the 102 to 103 instead of the 101, or you don't have to take X, Y, and Z language, or you can skip into next level of math for whatever reason. So I would just think about that a bit strategically too, in terms of like whether you send a score if you're not feeling confident about your performance within the AP exam. But showing that dedication, continuing honors to AP, IB, or even taking classes at your local community college, all of those things set you apart if that's not an option at your school.
So it sounds like they don't necessarily use AP scores for admission. They're looking more at your GPA and how the AP classes contributed to that, but will use AP scores if you submit them when placing you in classes later and deciding whether or not you need to take general ed courses.
Yes, exactly.
Great. All right. Well, we are over on time. I think if we can answer one more question just very quickly is, do colleges today look for well-rounded students or ones who have more depth? And then if we answer that quickly, and then we will end things. And if you do need to go, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar within the coming days. So you will be able to look back on everything that we talked about and have access to all the information.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I would just like to challenge you and say that well-rounded students typically have a lot of depth.
I would agree.
Yeah, that's it's like you can't be well-rounded and not have depth because you're having so many different experiences, and that's going to contribute to how you see and talk about and feel things. But it's a mix of both, I think.
Yeah. And maybe I might be misunderstanding. You're talking about focusing on one particular thing to an umpteenth level. Like you play violin, but you play it to the extreme versus you're present here, you're this. Mm-hmm. I would say both are great, because if you're dedicated to one, that is depth. That is well-roundedness too, because you're tutoring on the side with violin, and maybe you're doing free concerts or benefits, or you can build the well-roundedness from one particular depth. I'm sorry if I misunderstood. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. You don't have to be in every single club and also be an expert in something. Well, being in every club, you can kind of do what makes sense to you and follow your passions in that way. And if you are focusing on one thing, it's kind of like being in a lot of different clubs because you're fulfilling a lot of different roles within that. Is that kind of what you were saying, Arianna?
Yeah.
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 All right. Well, everyone, I want to say thank you for joining us. Arianna, Fedjounie, it was great to have you both. I know I learned something. I'm sure everyone else did as well. And I hope that everyone has a great rest of their day. And I'm wishing you all the best of luck with your upcoming college applications.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Everyone.